Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me in another of my monologues. I appreciate you coming in and tuning in as and when you do, and I must apologise that this video has come up a bit late. You may have noticed that what with Julia and I disappearing off to our little piece of God's earth to try and do a little bit of self-sufficiency, as John Seymour might have said, and what with the trip down to the post office to get the Biggleswick book out to all those people who've ordered their copies, these videos are not as regular or on time as they once were. And today you'll notice that yes, I'm just filming rather without the usual care and attention, because I realised that half the day's disappeared, so I just wanted to get today's video out. But just to say that I'm doing my best to get the books out to you. I know a lot of people have ordered them, and where possible we're doing the best we can, and well, we're doing that all the time. So having got that out of the way, I want to talk about well, I want to sort of shift my attention a little bit to sort of a more spiritual natures, or more positive mental attitude natures. Life at the moment is quite tough for a lot of people. It's tough for Julia and I, it's tough for everybody, I think, at some point. We've seen all sorts of strange things going on in the world. And I want to sort of say that sometimes, you know, when you're looking for the truth of something, or you're trying to get to make a decision, and we often look outside of ourselves for that truth, or for guidance or advice. And very often that truth is not really out there, but it's more inside. Now, I have in the past spoken about this sort of thing before, and I want to talk again, really, I suppose, because I'm aware that there'll be new people coming to the channel all the time. And many people would have come to the channel because I was talking about some of the strange goings on that people have told me about, that I've discovered, and I've shared my opinion on those things. And of course there's been a plethora of different ideas and suggestions and things you develop in your mind, and you change your mind about certain things, you look at certain things from different angles, and I think that's all very important, to be able to look at a situation from different points of view. And as I say, sometimes you take that guidance or that advice or those opinions from elsewhere. But very often it is important, I feel, and this is only my point of view, that we also look for, I suppose some people might call it spiritual guidance. Other people might think of it as just deep reflection or cogitation, if you like, within. And it is important to slow down and not get caught up in the busyness of everything. Very often we do find ourselves becoming very concerned with stuff that really has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our ordinary daily lives, and that we get so wound up in those things perhaps that are taking place in the world, on the other side of the world, that really we can't do anything about, and we forget what is going on here. And sometimes to get to that and to understand who and what we are ourselves, that we have to do a little bit of a trip inwards, into the mind, if you like, and spend time just within ourselves. Because I think often the answers that we're looking for can come to you in a more, well, I suppose you might say, in a divine way, in a way that comes by allowing yourself to be. Now, a lot of people would talk about the eternal now, for example, and I think that's a very interesting idea. And I think it's also very true. There is only the eternal now. And sometimes we're so wrapped up with things that are going to happen to us, and we get worried about that, or things that have happened in the past that we can do nothing with, other than perhaps learn from those experiences or bring them back to remember. And of course, it's useful to reflect on things that have happened in the past, because that can give us the basis for actions in the future. But how much time and credence do we give to the moment now, and that ability to halt and put things on pause for a moment, if you like? Not that really life can ever be put on pause, but sit and reflect or think or cogitate or be aware of the moment. And I think that's the place one does need to go on occasions to get the advice and knowledge of what is real. You see, I think, and this is again, it's just my point of view, and people are very welcome to disagree, and it's great that people do, because it's those myriad of different points of view which build up our knowledge of what might be everything, what might be the world around us. But I think a lot of what we see and do is quite illusionary, and that actually the inner truth of who and what we are is not necessarily what people have told us that we are, or the narrative that has been given to us, but something quite different. And that retreat, if you like, into ourselves to listen to ourselves is very important. And that's where I think sort of meditation, mindfulness, if you like, quiet time is absolutely essential, because we're so busy and we almost forget just how powerful that we are. And when I say powerful, I don't necessarily mean with muscle power, physical power, or indeed sort of that ability to do all those esoteric things, you know, the sort of, I don't know, things like moving things, or manifestation of things, or, you know, magic. I'm not necessarily saying that, although I do think there is elements of that in us that we don't really understand and know about. And there'll be many more people who are far more expert on these sort of things. No, when I say how powerful we are, I really mean how powerful we are in order to organize our thoughts and organize our understanding of things and the world around us. For example, emotions are something that can easily get out of control. We can get very angry very quickly. We can get very frustrated very quickly, can't we? The negative emotions can rise up in us, and we can say things that we regret. And I've said that, done that many times in the past, of course, like most of us, in the heat of the moment, said things and I think, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. And I guess that's where in the quiet time we can reflect on those things and go, well, in a similar situation, perhaps I wouldn't do that. We can also prepare for what we might say and run scenarios in our minds for things that might happen in the future, whether that's preparing, I don't know, for an interview with somebody, or a conversation that we've got coming up that might be a bit tricky, or we need to say sorry to somebody, that we can perhaps put ourselves into that frame of mind. I think this sort of thing is very powerful. It makes us, it gives us the ability to almost create a situation before it's happened so that it can go the best it can in the future. But sometimes we just have those tricky problems. I mean, there are continual problems that people will have is, I need more money, I need to pay this bill, or I've got to face up to this problem, or I don't know how I've got to get over this hurdle. And that, I think, is something that, again, the power of not so much the mind per se, but of us, the inner strength that we often forget that we have, is there in those quiet times, so that we can sit. Sometimes you don't have to sit, of course, you may be doing it as a stroll. I mean, sometimes my best thinking or my best quiet time is actually wandering around over the downs, perhaps, or just wandering in the parks, or aimlessly washing up, or something else, wandering about the house doing silly chores that I don't have to think. It keeps the body occupied, but I can go off into flights of fancy. And sometimes those flights of fancies are not just fanciful, but actually they're very useful, because it's almost like it opens a gateway to thoughts that perhaps I wouldn't have had, or those emotions that perhaps were bugging me and getting me frustrated or angry or annoyed, as I was referring to earlier, to dissipate those for a moment and take me out of that situation. I think we are more powerful than we think and that we imagine, that the opportunities are more plentiful than we put up the barriers to. Oh, well, I'm never going to get here. We use language, don't we, that almost is shackling us, is putting bars in front of ourselves, disabling our potential by saying it's impossible, I'll never achieve this, or I'll never do that. And I think just from a purely psychological point of view, never mind a spiritual point of view, that is not helpful. But we can see and feel the problems in the world when they're all around us, because we don't spend enough time just reflecting on who and what we are. And who and what we are, of course, everybody's going to have a completely different opinion on those things. I'll have a different opinion and idea to what I am, what I truly am, you know, not just the physical self, not just a label that's been pasted on me, what people say I am, but what I really am. And that is more revealed, I suppose, when you go into those quiet spaces, when you start to reflect. Now, it can be quite disconcerting doing that for the first time. And I think a lot of people have been almost trained not to do it. We have mobile phones that keep us, it's a new term that I'd only heard the other day, never heard of it before, and that's doom scrolling. Have you heard of that? This is what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, where you're scrolling endlessly, almost as if you're looking for something. You're diverting your attention because everything seems more interesting and more colourful, more productive, more, I don't know, it makes you feel better because your mind is over there scrolling for something, rather than the much more beneficial and rewarding ability to think for oneself. One of the things I've spoken about many, many times is that ability to be responsible for ourselves and not let other people or bodies do those things for us. And it is, in my opinion, much more rewarding to be able to be as self-sufficient as you can, not necessarily in growing food and things like that, but self-sufficient in your own thought, being able to work out a problem, not by bringing it in and desperately trying to perhaps see the logic in it, but allowing perhaps the subconscious mind or a higher conscious, perhaps God, to communicate with you in those quiet times. Because we get very het up and very stressed and very worried from those outside influences. And we forget that actually we have the ability, a very powerful ability, takes time to hone, but we can find those ways. And sometimes it is listening to ourselves, just going back into that quiet moment and listening and allowing that inner voice to speak. And I think, as I say, people have been trained to take their thoughts outside of themselves all the time. And it takes a lot of effort to be quite content to be with oneself and listen to oneself. As I say, it's just my opinion, and I think that it's something that's worth bearing in mind in those het-up days, in those stressful days when the world around you seems to be falling apart, or things and body corporates seem to be attacking you, that actually there's always a way out, if only we can train ourselves to get back to listening to our inner selves. Let's face it, 100, 200 years ago, we weren't bombarded in the way that we are today with phone calls and emails and letters and people coming round, or your phone coming up with internet dopamine hits and likes and all that sort of stuff. People spent a lot more time on, not necessarily on their own, but able to think, particularly when they were out in nature, perhaps labourers digging up vegetables or planting or cutting hedges or digging ditches or spending time doing things, perhaps repetitive things, their mind was allowed to wander. And sometimes that's very important, I think, because as your mind is wandering and you're not really focusing on something, that inner voice has a chance to penetrate and say, hey, what about this? And it may come as what just seems to be an idea or a suggestion from nowhere. But if we don't allow that inner voice time to come out, those wonderful little pearls of wisdom don't always get through. And those little pearls of wisdom might be the answers we're looking for. Anyway, I just wanted to share that in today's video. Thank you for tuning in. If you are interested in the Biggleswick book, thank you so much. And if you've already ordered one, I do hope that you've got it and I hope it's arrived safely. I'm doing my best to get it out to you. But if you are interested, email me, richard@vobes.com, and I'll tell you how to get one. And I will do my best to get it out to you as soon as I can. Anyway, in the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and thank you for tuning in and being part of this channel. Till next time, goodbye.